So welcome to week 3. I figured the best place to start off of week 3 would be developing information security policies, because our focus this week is organizational security and responsibilities. So here is normally a good one for organizations is first line of defense, policies. So one of the first questions you have to ask yourself is, why is developing a good security policy difficult? This has been a huge thing. It's not always a good policy, but it could also be an effective policy. It's more than just locking doors and changing passwords periodically. It has to reflect the overall organization. It has to keep in mind business goals, business objectives, and the mission over the organization. For example, we can totally secure a school if we locked all the doors and we never allowed anyone in. But realistically, that would not align to the mission of that organization. Security would be through the roof, but we're not able to accomplish our mission, so it would be a fail. Normally, within a good policy, we have to address numerous issues. HR issues, physical and environmental securities, governance, compliance, regulations for our individual or industries, costs of the policy, IT and other technical challenges. So let's look at costs. I've had some organizations flat out say, we would rather break the law because it's cheaper in the long run to keep breaking the law than it would be to become compliant. For example, PCI DSS is mandated by the state of Nevada. We took care of a payday loan company. In order for them to be compliant, it cost them $1 million+, roughly, because they were that far out of compliance. The owner asked, well, what's the first fine? The first fine is $250,000, give or take, at the time that this was happening. That's no longer the case, but I mean at the time, that's what the fine was. And the owner flat out was like, well, pay $1 million now, or, roll the dice and risk getting caught. If we get caught, we can always then pay for it. But what is the likelihood of us getting caught? And so they opted not to become compliant because the cost was too high. So, policies are very important, but at the same time, the cost of those policies are also very important. Another big reason that they're difficult is they have to be comprehensive. They must be unambiguous. Must be a human document, not technical, meaning humans can understand it. Must be comprehensive, must cover all areas. Must be unambiguous. Great example, I have a policy for one of my organizations. Nothing offensive in nature is allowed to be transmitted over the network. But they never define what is offensive. And so if you start looking at the dictionary, offensive then becomes really ambiguous. So they've already failed to meet the not being ambiguous. Clear English is very important. The first step towards enhancing organizational security is developing and implementing of a precise yet enforceable is the key word there, security policy, informing staff of the various aspects of their responsibility, general use of the organizational resources, and explaining how sensitive information must be handled. The policy will also describe in detail the meaning of the term acceptable use, as well as listing prohibited activities. That is a huge thing. It must be enforceable. You must explain to people their responsibilities, the general use of business resources, how to handle sensitive information, what is allowed, what is acceptable, and what is not allowed, what is prohibited. Those are key areas that must be hit with. Know the organization. That's a big thing. Every organization will probably be slightly different. So you cannot have one set of policies that fit every organization. You have to look at things like business models, goals and missions, organizational personality, individual organizational structure. All of these play into developing a good strategy or a good policy for that organization. So the question becomes, where do we start? First thing that we do is some form of risk analysis. We need to understand the risk facing our organization. And normally we do a risk analysis. Understand how the organization does or intend to manage those risks. This must also include vulnerability assessment. What areas are we vulnerable? Next, a risk assessment. Risk management approaches are better for connecting to business drivers and protecting the correct assets. We must understand what risks are involved. We have to understand how we're mitigating those risks. We have to understand how our policies are helping to mitigate those risks as well. Again, the policies must be enforceable. A vulnerability assessment normally is reactive. What tools are driving them? Are they only focused within the technical domain? What about the lack of connection to business drivers? These are all key areas for vulnerability. We need to see where there might be a breakdown between technical and business goals, as well as staff. That way we can start mitigating or removing or even reducing those vulnerabilities so that they become less of a exploit. Next, standards. Understand the standards that your organization should be complying with. That's a huge thing. Because every organization is going to be different. You have to understand your organization and the standards that they may meet. Also, here's a good time to bring up looking at the industry that you work in and seeing what standards other organizations have adopted. That way, you guys are meeting the same standards. Legal issues. Things like unauthorized access or use of tools. What about personal or personnel requirements? Data protection. All of these have to be addressed within some type of policy. For example, we have a policy where I work where there is no unauthorized use of installed software. Any software that's installed has to be done through the appropriate channels, which is a technician. It might seem very cumbersome, but in the long term, we're making sure that we're staying legal. Any issues of piracy or access to software, it's ran through our technician first and foremost. Applicability. Not everything will apply to all organizations, so you have to understand how to see what standards, what rules, what policies govern you. That's a huge thing, because if we're talking about defining a wireless policy, yet your organization has no wireless, then what's the point of defining that policy when you don't have something? So make sure it's applicable to your situation. Establish responsibility. Clarify who is responsible for what or to whom. This will also help promote an effective way to bring the organization together. Also, share responsibility. Don't just have all the responsibility on one person. Lastly, understand the importance of compliance. Compliance requirements must be precise. Essentially, compliance is meeting regulatory law that's dictated either by the industry or by the government. That way we can make sure that we're meeting them. Compliance is normally applied equally within the organization or organizations. You also must define the consequences of failure to meet those compliances. With PCI DSS, the biggest one is jail time, fine, or the more commonly one, you will not be able to accept credit card for X amount of time. Let's talk about point of contact. Within our policies, who do you contact if you have a question? Should that be listed? I surely do believe that it should be listed because, well, if you have a question, you need to know who to go to. Questions on the security or information assurance policy need to be resolved quickly and clearly. That way people trust the policies. Visibility. The actual policies must be visible to everyone. Not just those enforcing, but to everyone. Now, lastly, we need to worry about policy changes. Is there a standard for the way we change our policies? And if not, why not? Because that should be there. And that is this section for our policy management. I thought this was a really good section to begin with, just because it mainly hits home within our organizations. I wanted to thank you. So I think a good second half to this, because we're dealing with organizational responsibilities, I thought discussing IT governance and information security would be a really good thing. So our objectives for our governance is, first of all, describe IT governance committees, strategy committees, steering committees, security steering committees, describe like missions, strategic plans, tactical plans, operational plans, define quality and quantitative. You get the gist. Within our corporate responsibility, our corporate management side of things, we have to understand certain key concepts, and governance is one of those big ones. So what is governance? And I'm going to be looking at corporate governance, which is leadership by corporate directors in creating and presenting values for all stakeholders, and IT governance, ensuring that the alignment of IT with the enterprise objectives. Keep in mind, responsibility of the board of directors and executive management. So IT governance is the alignment of technology with business objectives. Corporate governance is the actual leadership and the creation and presenting of value to all the stakeholders involved. Governance serves the business, not itself, or IT. So that's a big thing. Presenting value, normally helping the organization pursue its goals, not unnecessarily expenditures. Meaning, we're not looking at buying the latest and greatest. Our goal with our governance is to meet the business goals, to align our budget, our spending, our tasks to the objectives of the business. Stakeholders Okay, that's a very interesting question, is who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders are anyone who has an interest in the organizational goals and is affected by policies, including business managers, partner employees, investors, just to name a few. But all of them are part of the stakeholder pool. So what are the objectives for IT governance? Deliver IT values to the business. Again, aligning the technology aspect of the business to the objectives of the business. It also helps to facilitate IT risk and to manage that risk. So, part of this process is to equip IS functionality and address risk and risk values. Measuring performance so that we can deliver the technology value to the business. And one of the last major things for our objectives is comply with all legal and regulatory requirements, whether it be government or industry, private or public sector. Let's look at some of these committees. Normally we're looking at a few different types of committees. A strategy committee focuses on the direction and strategy advisory board, and it's on the IT strategy and the alignment optimization of IT to look at costs and risk of the organization. And normally this is board members and sometimes some specialists. Next, a steering committee, and that focuses on the implementation, monitoring current projects, deciding where to spend IT funds. And this is going to be business executives, technical users, maybe CIOs, advisors, legal and audit and finance teams. That way they can steer the appropriate technology to again align with the business goals. Keep in mind that IT strategic is a high level. They approve business strategies and may help to define or to decide it. The steering committees are normally lower than IT strategic, but it still involves management. When you think steering, that focuses on deciding where to turn when driving a car. The car is still on the ground and navigates through real traffic, but you have to think about how to steer it. And that metaphor you can apply to the technology steering. So IT strategy committee's main concerns are, again, alignment of technology with the business, the contribution of the technology to the business, the exposure and containment of risk, the optimization of technology costs, and then the achievement of strategic IT objectives. Again, IT plans must align with business plans. IT delivers promised benefits and objectives. All understand the risks involved. IT will deliver IT services at optimized costs. Groups should be able to track performance via some form of agreed upon metric. All of those are important. The steering committee's main concerns is making decisions of IT being centralized versus decentralized, along with the assignment of responsibility. Making recommendations to the strategic plan, approving the actual IT architecture or design, reviewing and approving plans, budgets, priorities, and monitoring projects. So the steering committee is mainly about making sure we're on track. The strategic plan is not. So what do we mean by strategic planning? Normally strategic planning is long-term planning, which is 3 to 5 years, direction consider of the organization's goals and regulations, versus tactical, which is normally 1 year or short term. And that's going to be, again, plans moving the organization and strategies to meet those specific goals. Next, organization or operational. And those are going to be detailed or very specific technical plans for the very short term. So part of that security strategy planning could involve risk management or laws, governance, policies, organizational security, audit, risk analysis, business continuity, metric, responses, security, metrics. So is there some type of framework or planning for this? And there is. Part of the strategic planning could be part of COBIT. COBIT normally exists as a framework to help meet SOX compliance, but this is a good one because to meet certain tactical implementations for the strategic goals, sometimes achieving COBIT is the quickest and easiest route. And that could be things like during the next 12 months, every business unit must identify applications in use. What applications must they use? Versions of software. What about stored data? How do I know if it's critical or not? Or if it's being used or if it can be archived or not? All of those are major plans. All users must undergo general security training. That's been a big one. And lastly, standards must exist for all policies, and again, they must be enforceable. So the standard IT balance scorecard may look something. We break them up into mission, strategies, and measures. Direction is our mission. Serve business efficiently and effectively. Our strategy could be the overall objectives. Quality through availability could be one of the strategies. Process maturity. Again, this is going to vary. And measure. How are we going to measure it? Quantitatively or qualitatively? Statistically? And here is our overall scorecard. And we will do this for each business process to make sure that we are meeting our plan. And this is part of the tactical plan, which will build to our strategic plan. First, financial goals. How should we appear to stakeholders? What's our vision? How are we going to measure it? How are we going to make sure that we're able to perform it? What about customer goals? What about growth goals? Those are our scorecard. That's how we're going to start keeping score, making sure that we are aligning ourselves to the necessary goals and missions laid out by the business. So here could be our strategic time frame. Incorporate the business. That's going to be a strategic plan because that's long term. Maybe work on passing audits. Again, that's going to be long term. But we can do some short time frame events, which would be more tactical, which is perform strategic level security training, which could include a risk analysis, a BIA, and better defined policies. Those would then outline into a specific time frame. That way we have some type of way to measure our success. Are we going to be able to complete our BIA in a year? Sure. Are we able to do that in less time? Might be reliant on the organization. So for that, you're going to have to cater this, or you're going to have to tailor this to individual organizations, because there is no one shoe fits best with this. Operational planning. Objectives and timeframes. Who's responsible? Still, we're talking about our score sheets. Part of, if we're looking at hiring an auditor, how long should it take? When should we be starting? What about if we're looking at establishing security teams? How long should it take? Who would be responsible or in charge of this? These are all things that should be written down. What are our objectives? What are we trying to accomplish? What's the time frame? Lastly, who's in charge of it? Who's responsible for it? Here's another form of scorecard. And here we'd be doing the same thing, except here we're working more on application, technology, organizational, and flow. And we'd break them up into scopes. Enterprise model, system model, tech model, detailed representation. That way we could break down each individual business unit, and we can verify the scope of that unit, where they fit in the enterprise, in the overall system. Outline detailed representation for those specific groups and how they pertain to our application, technology, organization, flow. Horizontally, the different aspects to be considered. Vertically, could be the different levels of abstraction. Our enterprise model, normally our business model. Our system model is normally our architect or design model. Technology model is our technology selection. Detailed representation could be configuration of technology, as an example. I guess the next question is who's going to do it? Sourcing practice. Is it going to be in-sourced, outsourced, maybe a hybrid, partially in or out? Is it going to be off-site, on-site, near-shore, offshore? What about some of the advantages of each one of these? That we're not going to cover. But I mean, these are some serious questions that normally would have to be asked. If we are looking at building a top secret, brand new vehicle, should we ship it to China for them to manufacture? Because we know if we outsource to a Chinese company, they may or may not hold to a contract or believe in copyright, so they may not abide by it. Not saying that all Chinese companies do that, but some may not. So I mean, when we start looking at outsourcing, who are we going to outsource to? Those are all really big things. What about quality? Quality in terms of ISO standards. For example, ISO 9001 is the standard for quality management systems, and that defines things like quality manual, HR, purchasing, performing gap analysis. That way we could see the differences where you are and where you want to be. But what is quality? Quality assurance ensures that staff are following defined quality processes, versus quality control conducts tests to validate software is free from defects and meets expectations, assuming we're talking quality control of software. Performance optimization. Again, we have to be able to optimize the performance of each of our business units. Part of IT is to help make things more efficient. So IT, through technology, should increase performance for all organizational units. Part of that is managing and updating metrics, accountability, gather and analyze the data, report and refine. Categories of performance measuring, control profiles, risk awareness, and benchmarking. Where are we at right now versus where do we want to be? Where are we at right now versus other people in the same organization or different company, but within the same kind of job spot? Measures are effectively statistics. This provides some categories for performance metrics. So that's something that should be looked into. We do not want to reinvent the wheel if it's already being invented for us. Auditors and compliance staff. Again, governance deals with the alignment of the organization's missions, vision, values, objectives, and strategy. How do we verify that IS and IT meet those same compliances? And we can't do that without some type of verification. So what's an auditor? An auditor is someone that verifies information. So part of this is recognizing problems. Could be looking at user complaints, excess costs or budget overruns, like projects, motivation. Could be something with a lot of hardware or software defects, poor computer response times, all kinds of things. All of this deals with areas where people aren't normally close to being viewed in this area. A common thing is, what is the most important function of IT? And again, that's cost effectiveness. Normally IT doesn't make the business money. It allows other business units to run more efficiently and effectively, thus generating more money through the use of technology. Again, alignment with business objectives, alignment with availability, and reviews of process to make things overall better. Another question is, product testing is most closely associated with which department? Should be quality control. So what are some executive management for security concerns? Basically reduce liability, both civil and legal liability, that relates to the business and the organization. To provide policies and standard leadership, to help with controlling risks to an acceptable level, optimization. It's all about being able to understand the legal language and helping map our business goals to organizational goals. That means mapping out our security programs and its to different areas like technical issues, policies. Who do they go to? Are they verified through any committees? Lastly is our relationships. We have a Chief Information Security Officer. How do they interrelate to one another? Do they interrelate to one another? And our last slide, security governance, the framework. Everything is interconnected. Everything goes through our security framework. Our security strategies, our organizational security, our compliance, our policies, procedures, and standards. All part of the network. The security strategy must be linked with the business objectives so that the security organization must be avowed of any conflicts of interest. Devoid. A security framework considers all of these aspects. So that's something I wanted to keep in mind. Organizations are liable for the things that employees do. So keep that in mind. I wanted to thank you guys, and I hope you had a great time. Okay, so I wanted to discuss some follow-up items. One of the first things is our APA formatting and citation. That goes for both our IPs and our discussions. Remember that we have to do all of our work according to the APA manual. So if you're not sure how to do that, go online. You can type in APA formatting. If you don't want to look it up online, you can go to any of the tutorial services. We have a writing, we have a library service. They can give you additional resources on how to do APA formatting. That's important. That's not going away. In discussions, same thing. We have to be doing our citations in our discussions, because one of the big things is, for our citations, we're building off of other people's works. So it's a way for us to verify what we're claiming is supported by the literature. So when I say something at the sky is blue, you can take my word for it, or if I provide a citation, you can take an expert's word for it, and then I build off of that. So it just kind of increases your credibility. We should be at least citing in every post, or as much as possible, because again, we're trying to link what we've done back to the literature. Same thing in our IPs. Every paragraph should be tied to a source. Every paragraph is an idea, and every idea we need to have support within the literature. And I know at this level it's not that big of an issue, but you want to get in the habit of doing that, so when you start doing higher level work, it's second nature. Also, length. We don't need posts that are great job. I mean, don't get me wrong, it does add to it, but when I start grading for posts, I'm not doing full credit for those that have 3 posts and 2 of them are great jobs. I don't count the great jobs as a post. For our discussion board, I'm looking for 3 solid responses with citations. For our papers, I'm looking for 3 pages of content with citations. So what I mean by content is that's 3 papers on topic. That's not a cover page, that's not your reference page, that's 3 content pages. 2 if you're really good, but I'm really looking for 3 if you're doing diagrams. Diagrams totally are okay, as long as you're doing them within APA formatting. Lastly, grading. Again, I grade heavily off of attempt, like if you're putting an effort into it. Like if you did 2 pages and you did a few citations, and I could see that you were making an effort, I'll meet you. But if you post once, or you did a page and a half with 1 citation, you know, that really isn't you making an effort. If you get stuck, don't get me wrong, some people a page is a lot. If you get stuck, you have plenty of resources to bolster up your paper. You can contact me, I'll help you. If you don't want to contact me, we have a writing center, we have a tutorial center, we have plenty of help for you to get. If you need tutoring, there's a lot of tutoring out there. And again, provided from the school. All you have to do is say something. For our tutorial lab, we have tutorial services for SQL, we have tutorial services for database, we have tutorial services for math, English, writing, research, library services. I mean, we have a great amount of tutorial services. And if we don't offer tutoring in a specific area, you can ask for it specifically, and they will find tutors for you. So you could not get tutoring because you can. If you ask for help, the school will get it. If you cannot get it from the school, there's other help. I will sit down with you. I will do as much as I can with you if you need one-on-one. If you need tutoring and you don't get tutoring, that's not a failure on my part. That's not a failure on the school's part. That's only a failure on your part, because there's plenty of opportunities there. You have my number, you have my email, you have 2 emails from me, you have my cell phone number, you have plenty of ways to get a hold of me if you need help. And again, if you don't capitalize on help and you need help, that's on you. Okay, there's plenty of help out there. All you have to do is say something. Thank you.